Question number 1. The phrase starched and ironed her face in line 1 is best interpreted to mean that Janie does what? If we look at the passage, we see that Janie starched and ironed her face, and then the passage uses a simile to tell us that her face is like a wall of stone and steel. If we look at option C, erected a facade appropriate to a formal occasion, we have the word facade, which indicates something that's built to be out in front for everyone to see while it disguises what's behind it. This idea ties into the idea of her face being like a wall, and it also goes along with the lines, "She sent her face to Joe's funeral and herself went rollicking with the springtime across the world." The funeral is a formal occasion, and her face is a facade that hides her rollicking inner self, so C is the correct answer. If you look at the rest of the answers, A, kept her composure by doing household chores. Janie isn't doing household chores here, she's going to a funeral. B, stiffened her resolve to confront painful reminders of her past. There's no indication that she's confronting any painful reminders. In fact, she's inwardly rollicking with the springtime, which is pleasant rather than painful. D, resolved her emotional ambivalence toward her late husband. Ambivalence refers to contradictory or mixed ideas or feelings, and there's no indication of that in this passage. E, determined to keep her grief under control during the funeral. Janie has no real grief to control. Outwardly, there's weeping and wailing, but inwardly, there's resurrection and life. She's rollicking with the springtime. So, C is the only answer that fits this question, and it is the correct one. Question number 2. The phrase rollicking with the springtime across the world in lines 11 and 12 evokes Janie's what? Looking at the passage, we can see that while Janie is attending a funeral, she's inwardly rollicking with the springtime across the world, and these two ideas are quite a contrast. Rollicking, which implies fun, boisterous activity, is not usually associated with funerals, so we can see from this that Janie is inwardly excited. If we look at the answer choices, A says that this phrase evokes Janie's attitude toward her own future. We know from later in the passage that the funeral Janie is attending is that of her husband, so we can gather that Janie would certainly be thinking about her future here because it's going to be different than her past life. So A is looking great as an answer, but let's look at the rest. B and C will deal with those together. Evident panic at being a widow and disdain for the other mourners. There's nothing about rollicking with the springtime that indicates either panic or disdain, so we can eliminate those. D, preoccupation with natural events. There's not anything here to make us assume that Janie's thinking about natural events, so cross out D. E, desperation and fleeing from reality. Even if Janie might be fleeing from reality here, she isn't doing it with desperation. Remember, she's rollicking. So that eliminates E and leaves us with A, which is the correct answer. Question number 3. The phrase asking lonesomeness some questions in line 27 and 28 presents an example of what? Here you have a list of literary terms. If you know your literary terms, you won't have any trouble with this question. You should know that a soliloquy is a term that refers to a character speaking to him or herself on stage in a drama. A paradox refers to an idea or statement that seems self-contradictory. Personification refers to giving human attributes to something non-human. Ambiguity has to do with unclear meaning, and dramatic irony occurs when an audience has knowledge that a character in a work of drama or fiction doesn't have. If you look back at the question, you will see that if Janie is asking lonesomeness some questions, she is personifying lonesomeness, and so the answer is C, personification. Question number 4. Janie had hated her grandmother primarily for what? If you look at the passage and focus on the line, she had been whipped like a cur dog, you might be tempted to choose A, physically abusing her when Janie disobeyed, if you take that clause literally. But look at the passage more closely. Is there a good reason to take it literally? Nothing else in this memory about her grandmother is literal. Janie wasn't run down a literal back road any more than she was getting ready to travel to the literal horizon. So based on the context, you can gather that whipped like a cur dog is figurative language. And furthermore, A says that Janie was abused for being disobedient. There's nothing in this passage that indicates that Janie disobeyed her grandmother. So A is incorrect. Let's look more closely at the passage. It says that Janie had been getting ready for her great journey to the horizons. When we think of horizons in a metaphorical sense, we think of openness and opportunities and freedom. But instead of letting her journey to the horizons, Nanny runs Janie down a back road after things. Nanny's practical. She has Janie bypass the horizon that she's longing for and go down a back road, or a quick route to having things. The implication here is that Nanny has Janie marry someone who can provide her with material things rather than look for love or follow her dreams. In doing this, Nanny takes the horizon and pinches it into something that chokes Janie, twisting her in the name of love. So, of the choices we have, E is the best answer. Janie hated her grandmother for systematically repressing her free spirit. Question number 5. The image of a great journey in line 37 is a reference to what? We're looking at the same part of the passage here, and it says that Janie had been getting ready for her great journey to the horizons in search of people. This is talking about the earlier time in her life, before, as we saw in the last question, her grandmother had choked her by pinching the horizon down into something small. So if we look at what she was searching for in her great journey, other people, we can eliminate A because she isn't anticipating death here. B, life as a married woman, isn't what she was journeying toward. That is the implied pinched horizon that Nanny choked her with. She isn't looking for childhood haunts. Even though earlier she wonders whether she should look around the old stamping grounds, that isn't part of the great journey that she has been getting ready for at this earlier stage of life. D, the full experience of life, is a promising answer. It fits because Janie sees the horizons as the biggest thing God ever made, which ties in with the idea of full experience. And this is contrasted with Nanny's pinching the horizon down to a much smaller and less fulfilling experience. If you look at E, it doesn't fit because the great journey to the horizons is in search of people, and searching for people is not escaping reality. So the best answer is D, the full experience of life.